Today is April 30th, 2021, and I'm here today with World War II and Korean veteran Ed Pullen. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
And this is his story. Now, Ed, can you tell me, were you enlisted or drafted?
I was drafted.
Drafted.
But I would have enlisted even if I wasn't drafted.
Okay, where did you start training?
Fort McClellan, Alabama.
How do you spell that?
Fort McClellan in Alabama.
Okay, Alabama. Okay, when did you finish your training? What year?
Yeah, well, it was in 45.
45. Was it early 45?
Yes, early 45.
Okay. Now, tell me about going overseas. What did you take a ship?
Yes, we were sent from Fort McClellan over to California, Fort Ord, California, where we loaded onto ships and were sent overseas.
Okay. How long were you?
It took us about a month on a Navy ship going over. We first landed it in the Palau Island group, WWII Islands.
Mm-hmm.
WWII Island. It's a correlate tube, but at that time the Navy was using it as a repair base, and it was the largest naval base in the world at that time. Oh, we landed there. Then we were transferred into APAs and went up to Manila. And from there we went to Clark Field and were assigned to various units. And I was assigned to the 20th Infantry C Company, 20th Infantry, 6th Division.
You know what battalion?
The 1st Battalion.
Okay. What was the battalion again?
The what?
What was the battalion you were in? Sorry.
Oh, the 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry.
Okay.
6th Division.
Okay, so can you tell me about when you landed on the islands you were?
Let's see, I believe that was in August.
Okay, like which island did you first land on? Was it?
Well, it was right into Manila Harbor. Mm-hmm. We never left the ship I had in the WWII Islands.
Okay, so where were you when they dropped the atomic bombs?
I was just passing Hawaii on a Navy ship.
Okay, how did you feel about them dropping the bombs?
Oh, that was, well, I wouldn't be here today if they hadn't dropped that bomb, because we would have had 1 million casualties trying to enter to invade Japan, and it would have been a big bloodbath. So I was just overjoyed. It saved. Well, we would have lost 1 million men. The Americans would have lost 1 million men, and we would have killed 10 to 15 million Japanese. So you can plan maybe 20. It saved 25 million lives.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, after the Japanese surrendered, when did you start? When did you go to Korea after the war? Like.
It was probably in the end of September. We loaded onto ships, and we went up past Okinawa and ran into a typhoon, and had a terrible. Darn near lost our ships going up to Korea, but we landed in Korea in about September, October, maybe October, September or October. We landed in Incheon. We went in landing craft into the port of Incheon, Korea.
Okay.
From there, we went by railroad down to Mokpo, M-O-K-O. M-O-K-P-O, Mokpo, Korea.
Okay. How long did you stay in Korea after World War II? Or doing your job?
Almost a year.
A year. Now you became a military police?
Yes.
When did you start doing that job?
Was just a couple of months. I'll give you I'll show you.
Huh. Here you go. Now, what were the what was it like in Korea, like when you were being a military police? Was it a difficult job? Or?
Yeah, it was we're going into a country that was 18th century.
Mm-hmm.
They were that far behind in development. They had no vehicles. They had horses and mules. It was all they had. It was like dropping into the middle of the the country that was as far back as when we had our revolution, about 1800.
Mm-hmm.
And these people were actually, the Japanese had made slaves out of the Korean people. So they had a long way to go. But thank God for the United States soldiers that went in, and the army, the United States Army. We turned the other cheek,
mm-hmm.
and we became really friends and saviors of the Korean people. They are now one of the most advanced technically people in the world, and that's all because of the American soldiers that went in and taught them how to live a modern life.
Okay. Did you arrest any Japanese soldiers when you were military police, or
no? We took all. Well, we arrested all of them,
okay.
and sent them back to Japan. We took everything they had. We took their horses and the tack, and they had a blacksmith shop. We took everything they had, just their uniforms, and sent them home
mm-hmm.
on ships. And we took over from the Japanese. The Japanese were the only law in Korea for 50 years. And we went in and sent them home. So they had no police, they had no administration, they had no fire department or anything like that. So we had to fill in and do that for them. We became the police. We were mounted police in Mokpo, and they were very ruly people. They were very well. They were beautiful people, and we had a great time with them. Yes, there were renegades that we arrested and put in jail, but very, very few of them. Most of them were very nice people and were eager. They were happy that we were there, because this is the first time they've had their freedom for over, I think it was close to 50 or 60 years that the Japanese had occupied Korea. So yeah. They were overjoyed when we came and gave them back their life and their freedom.
Mm-hmm. Okay, did you ever have to arrest any war criminals?
No.
Okay. Now, is there anything else after, when you were in Korea? Did you do anything after that? Overseas?
No. No, I stayed in Korea. Uh, the Russians were sending saboteurs down in South Korea. They were they the Russians were wanted to take over all Korea, and they got the north, which was a crime, but our government let them do that. We should have taken over the whole peninsula at the time, but the Russians forced their way into North Korea, and we set up the boundary at the 38th parallel. And we had South Korea and they had North Korea. Well, they were invading, they were sending saboteurs down into South Korea to try to mess things up. Mm-hmm. And there were a number of times that we went down hunting for them, and we found a few Russian or North Koreans that were working for the North Koreans that were working with the Russians, and arrested them and sent them back north.
I didn't know the Russians would come into South Korea.
Yes, they wanted. Well, they were the ones that actually precipitated the Korean War. Uh-huh. They were training North Korean's army, and they sent a lot of troops, and their air force was in North Korea, and they're the ones that really started the North Korean War.
I didn't know that because I knew that the Russians invaded Manchuria.
You're right.
In 1945, but no, that's really less known about because they didn't know that.
Yes, and this was in 1945. You see, so the Russians, the only place they showed up was in their air force, because they had recruited the North Korean army. Mm-hmm. Up in North Korea, and they were the ones that they gave them the tanks and the weapons and everything, and they were the ones that started the Korean War in 1950.
Huh. I learn something every day. All right. Where were you when Pearl Harbor happened?
I was only 13 years old. I was in my hometown, Leeds, South Dakota. My father worked for the Homestake Mining Company, and I always say I was born on top of a gold mine, which is actually true, but the gold was a mile below us in the rock. But anyway, I lived in Leeds, South Dakota. I was in the Black Hills, and lived there until I was in high school. I went to St. John's Military Academy in Delafield, Wisconsin, because my father knew I was going to be drafted, and he wanted me into military training. So I went to a military school, which is at that time was about the equivalent of Culver Military Academy. Mm-hmm. It was about the same type of school.
What did you think of the Japanese attacking Pearl Harbor? I know it was unexpected, but what did you think of it?
Oh, I thought that was a horrible crime.
Yeah.
That they did that, and the reason for which it finally came out is they wanted to take over the whole Pacific, the South Pacific, and all the way to Australia, but and they did. Mm-hmm. And we had to stop them. But actually what they actually did is destroyed our Pacific Navy, which they destroyed a obsolete Navy. And our old Navy was an obsolete Navy. Mm-hmm. And they destroyed almost all our battleships and capital ships in Pearl Harbor. But it was a good thing because we got a chance to build all new ships.
Yeah.
And they missed all our aircraft carriers. That was the worst. That was the dumbest thing they did.
Well, the aircraft carriers were coming.
That's right.
To Pearl Harbor when this
they
happened.
They were out on sea, and they weren't there. And that was a huge mistake.
Yeah, it was. The war was already raging in Europe before Pearl Harbor happened.
Oh, yes.
Did they ever say anything about that in the newspapers?
Oh, yes, yes. We were newspapers were just full of all the war in Africa and Italy and in Europe, and the bombing that was going on in London. It was just a total. That was all the news was in those days. But they started calling up our reserves, our National Guards and so forth, in '39. So we weren't totally unprepared in '41 when this happened, and of course in '42, this was December 1st. So there was only 1 month left in '41, and quickly we were into '42, and my father sent me. My grandmother lived up in Skagway, Alaska. My father sent me up in '42 to Alaska. So I was in Skagway, Alaska, when the Japanese entered the Aleutian Islands. When they came in and bombed those and sent troops into and took over a couple of our islands in the Aleutians.
I know they took the island of Attu.
Yeah.
That was
right.
one of them. I don't know the others.
Yeah. Well, Attu, they bombed Dutch Harbor.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah. But I was in Skagway, and they, we set up our militia there, and because we were afraid the Japanese were gonna send some subs and troops down into Skagway to destroy the railroad that went from Skagway back up into Whitehorse, which was the only way to get into the entire interior of Alaska was through Skagway, into the Whitehorse and Yukon Railroad.
I knew the Japanese sent miniature submarines to Alaska.
Yes. Yeah.
They recovered.
We were afraid they were going to send subs in, but the Canadians kept corvettes. Their small warships were called corvettes, and they kept one right there at Skagway. See, we were only a few miles from the Canadian border up there.
So, is that all about your World War II talk you can think of, or is there?
Well, my experience there in Korea was that was about it. The horse unit that I was in didn't last the whole time. They finally gave up the horses, and then we became guards for the military government people as we went into various towns, Gwangju, and there were a number of other towns that we went into as guard for the military government, as we went around setting up town government and police forces and fire departments and so forth in southern Korea.
Did you ever see or meet any generals or like that?
No, not really. President Eisenhower came over to Korea during that time, and but that was during the Korean War. You see, I came back home in '46 after the in 1946, and I had enough GI time that I went to college and got a 4-year degree in college, and I took advanced ROTC and became an officer, and I joined the artillery And when I graduated in '51, I became a second lieutenant. And in December of that year, in '51, they called me in, and I went back into service at Camp Carson, Colorado, for the Korean War. And they put me into a mule pack artillery unit. We had mules that they thought they would. We had a 75 millimeter cannon, and the 4th Field was 75 millimeter, and we had horses. The officers rode horses, and the enlisted men led the mules. Mm-hmm. And we packed our mules up into the mountains, and that was basically for what they were used for, is to going up into the high mountains, because there wasn't any way you could get vehicles into them. And they used them in World War II. They were used in Italy, and they were used down in the jungles. Well, they still had 2 units left of them at Camp Carson. But then the Chinese entered the war in Korea and just virtually destroyed the 2nd Division. And they needed troops over there immediately, so they called up officers and sent over actually all the replacement they needed for the 2nd Division. I joined the 37th Field Artillery, 2nd Division.
Okay. 2nd Infantry?
Yes. Okay. 2nd Division Infantry. And I was liaison, or a forward observer for the 23rd Infantry. And at one time I was observer for over 100 tubes of artillery. And we stopped several of the Chinese pushes that came on our line, and we punished them badly in our artillery. We had a new type of artillery, shell, that was a game changer. We had a proximity fuse on the end of both our 105 and the 155 howitzer shells. And we could, the proximity fuse was an automatic. If you fired it, when it started coming back to Earth, when it got within 50 feet of the Earth, it exploded, and it never failed. And we could one battery could take an area big enough for 2 football fields, and kill everybody in them.
Oh, wow.
With this proximity fuse, because it would go 50 yards up in the air and just cover the ground with little hot pieces of shrapnel, and would kill. At one time we counted 1,000 bodies, Chinese. They attacked us, and they learned quickly. They did that things were pretty well over. That was when Ike came over and actually told the North Koreans and the Chinese, "You stop this war, or he was going to nuke them."
Oh, wow.
And they did. They believed him, and so they sued for peace. And actually, they bravado. They tried to act like they had won the war, but they didn't.
When did you get out of Korea after the Korean War?
Oh, in '53, in the middle of 1953, they brought us back to the United States, and I got out of the service then.
What did you when you came back from Korea in the Korean War? What did you do afterwards?
My brother had started a business in Rapid City, South Dakota, and he needed me badly there, so we went into partnership and ran a business there in Rapid City.
Mm-hmm. Were you gonna go into Vietnam when that happened?
No, I was too old by the time Vietnam came around. See, I had a son that was in Vietnam. By then I was close to 50 years old, and the Army didn't need me.
I think I think you did a good job.
If you'd like to go down and look at some of my stuff downstairs, I've been to the honor flight.